All right, everybody. So there you have it. What a, like I said, what a discombobulated mess of a case in terms of just trying to get through all of this um, evidence that should have been worked out and gone through way before we ever got to trial. It's really just, in my opinion, crazy. Um, so it looks like they're done for the day. Um, from what I can see, the feed is over, court's adjourned. So if you guys are following the case, I want you, it's been very difficult. To really understand at all times what's happening and what the crux of the case is. But this case is actually, in my opinion, it's a very, very interesting case because it's a completely circumstantial case. Basically, the case um, rests upon the idea that basically this young man was the last person to have been with to have been with Jay Lee. Jay Lee came to his house, drives to his house, as you see, and like we saw in Aaron Hernandez case. There's cameras everywhere. They tracked him all the way there. He pulls in, and there's text. There's text saying, "Hey, I'm here." He arrives, and then lo and behold, no one hears from him again from that point on. He doesn't say happy birthday to his mom on his birthday. No more financial transactions. And then the car that Jay Lee drove, who he lets no one else drive his car, is seen driving to the apartment complex that it's eventually towed from. And lo and behold, cameras catch an individual fitting the description of the defendant's clothing that he was seen getting into his friend's car. And they're able to track that because he ends up on the body cam of a police officer who pulls the friend over on his way to take Tim Herrington home. It's like if anyone ever thought of, man, if something just happened and you were going to kill somebody and you were going to try to get away with it, um, you know, and you would think to yourself, well, these are the different variables. How would you get caught? Well, this is it right here. I mean, this is as clean of getting caught as possible. There's no DNA because he strangled him. He puts the body. Now, we haven't got to this stage yet, but in the opening statements from the state attorneys, they said that there's going to actually be footage. Everybody's got cameras around here of him taking a wheelbarrow and a shovel out of his parents' garage and putting it in his car. Later that morning after he gets back from being dropped off with his friend. And then you've got the searches where he's searching missing college student in a lake. He keeps searching for this individual. Now, he's the last person. He doesn't call the police. He doesn't say, hey, I was with Jay Lee. Hey, this happened. So the question is, like, why would he not do that? Right? If he's the last person with this guy before he's missing, why would he have not been interested? He's interested enough to search Facebook. So the only thing I can think of, I mean, he's been out on bond. He comes from a well-to-do family who's got money. They posted this $250K bond, which he was in jail from August of 2022 until December of 2022 when he posted his $250K bond. And then eventually in 2023, they indicted him on capital charges where he's facing the death penalty, but he was still out on bond, which is interesting to me. And then on top of that, um, you know, uh, obviously they could have taken maybe a little more time, I think, with this case to try to get these pretrial motions taken care of. Javon Franklin, absolutely they do. But my point is they're proving it with circumstantial evidence. That's what makes it such an interesting case because it's a very circumstantial case. There's no DNA. There's no body. It's almost a perfect crime, except there's camera footage. There's social media footage. There's things that wouldn't have existed 20 years ago that would have allowed him to get away with it and may not now. The only thing I can think that the defense would be trying to do, well, no body, no case, not necessarily, Javon, because they're allowed to infer from these things with the lack of social media, the fact that, again, the biggest, most damning piece here is that this guy went to his house. He's texting, what was it, open, I think here or something to that effect. And let me see what it was. Hold on, I have it here written down. He says, give me a moment, I'll find it here. So here is the timeline of events. He says when he gets there, at what was it, 6? Hold on, I'm going through here. He says open. Well, Javon, I hear what you're saying, right? I hear what you're saying on that. The problem is the only down low man that this guy was, who this guy's car ends up at. The issue at hand, again, this is circumstantial. It is absolutely possible that any down low man could have done this out there, right? The problem is there's one down low man who was strangling how to strangle someone at 5:57 a.m. At 6:03, Jay Lee arrives, and after that, Jay Lee is never heard from again. And then the down low man who's sitting in the defendant's seat is then seen driving Jay Lee's car, or at least we can infer that it was him driving Jay Lee's car, since the car is seen pulling into that apartment complex. And we see a man dressed in the same clothing who eventually gets in the car of his friend, who gets pulled over by the police officer and is sitting in the passenger seat. You know, how do you explain that? You know, that's the circumstances. And then he leaves. So why is he driving Jay Lee's car from his apartment complex to the other apartment complex? Why is Jay Lee never heard from? I mean, like I said, it's a circumstantial case, and it's one that a jury could go back there and say, you know what, this isn't enough. But the question is, and it can be inferred, and circumstantial evidence, the judge is going to give that instruction. The jury is allowed, as the trier of fact, to infer things from. That's what the purpose of sole purpose of circumstantial evidence is. It's evidence by inference, and you can infer by the fact that this young man was seen running away from the apartment complex where the car is ultimately towed from, where Jay Lee is never heard from again. You can infer, and then he's searching missing college kid found in lake. He's searching how to strangle. You can infer from all of those things that that's what happened. So it's like, it seems like a difficult case, but if the jury would choose to make an inference to say that those things mean that, they can do that as a trier of fact, and that's what they're going to say. Now, I think the defense is hoping that the lifestyle of this young man, Jay Lee, that they're going to be so appalled by it that they're going to say, you know what, it's possible it could have been somebody else. It's possible he could have run off. It's possible he could have driven the car to another person's apartment, that they got into an argument and Jay Lee just left and went over there. The only question is, why the heck was Herrington running from the apartment? That's the problem. And then he's searching for, exactly, Melissa, he's searching for a lawyer. You know, I mean, they have a good case, you know. And Javon says he didn't want to hurt Jay Lee. It's Mississippi. I'm just going to leave it at that. Well, that's what I mean. I agree with you, Javon Franklin. I think that's what I mean. I think that's what he's banking on. I think that's what his attorney's banking on. And I think that we could be surprised at the results that come out of this trial with the verdict with the Mississippi jury. I don't think it's completely at all. This is not in the bag at all. Not by any stretch of the imagination. All right, give me one moment, guys. I'll be right back. All right. So I feel like no one is prepared for it. Yep. I agree with that. The state's not prepared. And says, and Kevin is well connected and plays golf with the judge. Look, oh, absolutely, Javon. Listen, I 100% agree with you on that. This attorney that this guy has hired, in the way the South works, a lot of people don't understand how it works. Now it's becoming a little different because lights are shining in, and that's part of why we have to shine the light in on a case like this, because it's important, that listen, just because you know, hold on one second. I want to get it. Because of this young man's lifestyle choices does not mean he deserves to be to be killed here. So it's my hope that obviously this jury will find will follow the evidence here. Now, listen, the way this attorney is going to argue it is Javon Franklin. Well, so you're connected then, I guess, probably to some of these figures, or at least you're familiar with the areas, places for potentially. Or do you know any of the players in this? Are you familiar with them? Sounds like you're kind of connected to this thing. So that's pretty cool. I appreciate you coming in and sharing. I can already imagine the defense's closing argument in this, and it's going to be, oh, Tim was your roommate. Okay, I got you. So you know Tim. Okay, well, fantastic. So what's your opinion of Tim? Do you believe Tim is innocent? Do you believe what is your were you roommates with Tim when this happened, or were you roommates at a different point? So uh, but I mean, I could already figure out the closing argument that they're going to make, and again, it comes down to it in a case like this: is you're going to lean on the fact that you've got to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he passed away. You've got to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he did this, and that's where they're going to lean on it. But I think it's going to be, I think that's where they're going to. Or at least that's where the defense is hoping. You graduated and left Oxford. I got you. I mean, are you still close with Tim now, or are you a supporter of Tim, or are you sitting somewhere neutral in the middle? Like I said, I'm sorry he's going through this, because I know it's, in terms of, if he did this, it's sad that he did it, because it means he wasn't comfortable with with himself, and that's sad that he took this type of extreme action. Um, that's sad that was the situation, but obviously, it's tough. It's a tough situation. I mean, I can imagine, if you know him, it's got to be a tough situation to watch this go down, because I mean, unfortunately, the circumstances and the circumstantial evidence in this case is pretty strong. But we'll see what they did with it. Jay Lee was my resident because I was his RA. He was a very interesting individual. However, no one deserves to lose their. No, absolutely not, Javon. Absolutely. So you knew the victim too. Wow. So I mean, he seems like he was kind of a flamboyant, outgoing individual. But again, that's my point. This is a tragedy all along, all around, because you've got one young man who, if he did this because he wasn't comfortable with his own self, and he went to extreme measures to cover that up, and that's very sad. And then you've got another young man who was out there living a risky lifestyle. Clearly, he was warned by his friends, and he went out and put himself in this scenario. He should have never showed up, because based on his Snapchat, that's what, again, and that's what I think is going to be hard to overcome for the defense. You've got these Snapchats. I mean, in the Snapchats, he's saying, and I quote, let's see here. He says, if you try something fast, it won't end good for you. And Herrington says, what you mean try something fast? He says, like, try to hurt me or some, or some, well, I think some shit. Herrington said, I know. And then he said, well, okay, we fixing to see if you lying. And then Lee says, "What's that mean?" Or Herrington asked about what, and Lee said, "Making it up." And then Lee said, "What's that mean?" And then they say, "Open." So that's the final conversation leading in to the final moment that no one ever hears from Jay Lee again. And that's a problem. That's the stuff that is so going to be hard to overcome. Now, the question is when you have a respected attorney like the attorney that is representing this young man, okay, um, and you have the jury that is made up there that I could see where this judge is talking church with them, joking around about church and church pews. That tells me that these are a conservative Christian people who are church going, who are going to put a lot of stock when they have someone in a position like Kevin is, who's the attorney for this young man, who is, I believe, a state senator, if I'm not mistaken, either state senator or state representative. But he's an important political person. He's a lawyer. He's a well-respected figure. You hire someone like him because when he speaks, people listen. When he speaks, people respect what he's saying. So when he stands up there and says, "Listen, we have something called, you know, the presumption of innocence. And in order for you to be convicted in this country, you must overcome the presumption of innocence. And the presumption of innocence means he's presumed innocent. It means if there's a conflict of evidence, means if there's an issue, if there's something that needs to be settled, it's always settled in the direction of the defendant. And as a result, if you have and on top of that, in order to overcome the presumption of innocence, you have to reach the level of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. In the Melody Ferris trial, they showed the steps. And he's going to say, listen, that's not enough to get to the top of the steps. You've got to go all the way through the door. And unfortunately, this case does present that potential possibility that a juror could sit there and say, well, we don't know if he's dead. What if he was in the car? What if he ran off? What if there's a fight? I'm interested to see what they say or what they're going to say, how they're going to explain this car going to the apartment. If they're going to try to say that was Jay Lee who comes in and fights, if Tim Herrington's going to testify. Okay, is a state senator. Okay, so you said you said you'll be surprised if he's convicted. Well, now, Javon, I think here's what I think though. I think what's happening down south, and I've watched this in other cases. I think what's happening right now is these jurors are aware of the television cameras in there, right? So I think that they're going to be a little bit more careful with what they come out with. I could be wrong, but I think sometimes the cameras in the courtroom make a difference because they know people are watching, so they're a little more careful to say, hey, we need to make sure we get justice. My crime time, why do you think that? I mean, let's go over the evidence that we have right now that's in front of us. I mean, to me, right now, this is, we have the Snapchat conversations leading all the way up. The timeline, that at 5:58 he leaves the campus walk. At 7:18 a.m. So 5:58 Lee leaves the campus walk. At 6:03 the open happens, and at 7:18 Lee's car is spotted at Rainbow Cleaners heading towards that apartment. At 7:21 he's spotted on the Rebel Drive, Jackson Avenue camera. 7:23, he's spotted at Rockett's One Stop gas station. And at 7:25, it enters the Molly Bar apartments, right? So an hour and 20 minutes later, his car is seen leaving and going. And then you see at 7:34, Tim is seen leaving or running out of Molly Bar Trail Apartments. So the question is, are they going to try to say that like he rode with this guy over to this apartment and that he was going to a hookup, and then Tim basically said, I'll ride with you over there, and then just got cold feet on whatever they were doing to hook up? So is it just because of the nature of the crime? I don't think. Kevin got a lot thrown out. A lot of stuff's not being admitted. Oh, sorry. Yeah, there's still more evidence to be presented. Let's see here. Let's go in the chat here. I'm going to make sure I get caught up. I'm going to go right back. I'm look lifestyle of the victim will find him not guilty, and this jury is sequestered, so it's terrible to keep them. I'm way back. All right. So Javon, you're saying a lot of stuff was thrown out. Are you saying stuff that was proving Kevin or that Tim did this, or are you saying that there's stuff that was favorable? Obviously, Kevin got a lot of stuff thrown out. So there's stuff that you're saying definitively that would have definitely proven that this young man did this or that Tim did this. In my crime time, you've seen the documents and the pretrial stuff. Right, but is it favorable to Tim or unfavorable to Tim that they won't ever see? In my crime time, I guess, are there a lot of documents online? I looked up. I was trying to see if I could find documents on the case. Is there a lot of documents online? Does Mississippi, if I go to the clerk's office, is there stuff on both sides of the fence? Well, like I said, the stuff I'm talking about right here. I mean, he's at this guy's house. They go to the apartment. Oh, it was in favor of Tim. Okay. In favor of Tim. Okay. So, Javon, if you don't mind me asking, I mean, maybe you can shed some light on some things here. What is it that we believe happened here? Like, is this a situation? Because again, all of those searches could absolutely be put in a totally different light. If he arrives and he's with this guy and they're going to another hookup, is that what happened here? Gotcha. Because he's not allowed. So, I mean, are we talking about here that he shows up, they're supposed to be hooking up, and then like Kevin, or not Kevin, I keep calling him Kevin, Tim agrees to go with Jay Lee to another place to hook up with somebody else, and that's why they drive over to those apartments, and then wherever they go, or whatever happens at those apartments, would obviously make sense. I mean, if there's any way to see two people. Well, no, I understand that, but what I mean is he was searching things about the college student found in a lake. So why would he be searching that? Why is he searching how to strangle somebody at 5:57 a.m. right before Jay Lee arrives? How long it takes to strangle somebody? Or are we going to say that was like to get into some kinky sex stuff? Is that what he's going to try to explain? Is Tim planning to testify? Do you know that? Because, I mean, if he testifies, he could put a spin on this case that totally throws the whole thing off. Because then all of that stuff could potentially be put into a narrative fashion that could explain what's going on. And then furthermore, why did he need to go to his parents' house to get a wheelbarrow and a shovel? It says because of the court documents, pre-trial, emotions, and judges stop things coming in. Well, I get the idea that this judge is definitely one of those stuff. Well, no, I know he never did. I mean, he couldn't really do that because I think that the graphic conversations, I think that's pretty clear. He's not denying that at all. But what I'm saying is obviously they had sex earlier in the evening or did some sexual activity earlier in the evening. And then there was a breakdown of whatever relationship they had surrounding that. Now, my question is, he said he was coming back clearly in the messages because he was agreeing to do a sex act he'd never done before. So, the issue then becomes, well, I understand that, Javon, but again, it's a circumstance situation, right? When he's seen going to get those tools, it happens to be right around the time that he is seen running from an apartment where a missing person's car is later found later that day or the next day. And then that person was later seen at his house as the last place he ever communicates with anyone on this earth. And then on top of that, so those things, again, normally, yes, you could just say, hey, he runs a moving company. That could have been something he was using for that. But, when you put the context in and you look at it, you can infer and say, well, wait a minute. What was he really doing? This kid comes up missing. Now, like I said, and then he's searching missing college student in a lake. It makes no sense. Now, again, I know what his attorney's going to argue is that, listen, we have to presume one innocent. So he's going to argue that it's an undetermined issue, or it's an issue, or that if you can't decide, if you're not completely certain, if you're not sure what was happening, if you can't say that something happened, if the state can't say that he indeed strangled somebody, or that there was a struggle, or that there was things that happened at that apartment, then you have, that's the definition in a sense of reasonable doubt, and you apply the presumption of innocence, and then that's where you say, okay, well, I can't say what happened for certain. Like I said, there's a definitive path that if these people want to go down that path, they can get to a path of not guilty potentially here. But I think that the box is closing around this situation, that when you look at it, if you put this to somebody like the Melody Ferris jury, they're going to convict. I mean, because that's the logic they use to get her. So it's just, well, what do you think happened, Crime Time? Are you going to, are you, I mean, again, I understand where you're going with this, is you're saying, well, listen, let's just say he died. Now, again, I know also the other aspect too is that they're going to say that they added, to make it a capital crime, they got to prove that there were two crimes being committed, that there was a second crime in addition to the first crime, or in furtherance of the crime. That's another thing too that a lot of people don't understand, is if the state charges in a specific situation, if they can't prove an element of capital unaliving, is that they've got to prove the kidnapping aspect. So if they can't prove he was kidnapped, they can't prove that, they can't go any further. And again, like I said, I think if this was a different circumstance with different people involved, and different people who were killed, this jury would be red hot to find him guilty with no problem. But I think this is the type of case that the circumstances, the victim, all of these things, the optics of it are going to potentially favor the defense here. And then you've got a respected state senator who's taken on the case, who's speaking for this young man, and that is going to make a huge difference. Well, that's true, Melissa. And if that's true. Like I said, what they're proving is something happened between them, but the state is short on proving it, that what they did. Now, but you have to understand though, the state or the jury is the trier of fact. The jury can infer through circumstantial evidence, and circumstantial evidence is the web searches. Circumstantial evidence is, and what the state's putting in front of the jury right now is they're saying, you have this instance where Tim Herrington appeared to be luring Jay Lee back to the house. Jay Lee was already suspicious. Jay Lee was already thinking he could get attacked. Jay Lee says if anything happens, it ain't going to go well. He comes back, and Jay Lee's never heard from again. The jury is allowed to say, well, you say, well, was it an accident? Well, not if he was Googling how to strangle somebody. The jury can say, they can infer from that and say, oh, no, that's evidence of strangulation. And then they say, well, where was the body? It was put in the lake. Well, did they search the lake? And I'm assuming they did. They didn't find it. Now, that is doubt, because if they searched all the lakes and he ain't in the lake, well, then where the hell is he? So maybe he's alive. And that is what could get the jury to not guilty, because that's the part that bothers me. Once you go through all that and you're like, okay, wait a minute, I think I stand here that he had to have done this. And then you go, wait a minute, but there's no body found. When you would like to think there's 71 searches and they found no evidence of Jay Lee. They found no evidence of anything. So the question is, what the hell happened? And the answer is, right now, we still don't know. And they raced and arrested this young man on the 22nd of July, way too early in the investigation, in my opinion. Well, because, potentially maybe he buried items that were used. Who knows? Maybe he was thinking he was going to bury them. Maybe he buried them out of lake. Who the heck knows? I have no idea. I'm just saying, it kind of all doesn't make a lot of sense. But the point is, the jury, what I'm getting at is the jury can make an inference from the search of the lake. What I'm addressing really is Melissa's saying, I need to get more evidence because it could have been an accident. But the jury, as triers of fact, can come back there and say, no, we are going to say that that evidence shows us exactly what happened, that the web searches show his state of mind, that the web searches were made showing what he was planning to do, and then they can infer that that's what actually happened, and they can go convict him. Or if you get an attorney, you can raise lots of doubt, and which is what he's trying to do. A lot of people are like, well, why is he questioning all this stuff? Because he's putting out there that this was a young man who had a lot of people out there that he was messing with. He was living a rather dangerous life because he preferred men on the down low or more masculine men who were not comfortable with their sexuality. And there was a lot of potential that he could have, encountered anybody out there who could have made him disappear. And I'm assuming that since, the problem, of course, is that Tim Herrington is the one that's seen leaving the apartment. That's where this thing ends. And they've got to have, in my opinion, they've got to have some sort of a suggestion that would say, well, he might have been going to see somebody else, and Tim Herrington was aware of it, and Tim Harrington got scared, and Tim Harrington was like, oh my God. And that's why Tim Harrington's searching. That's why he's looking. And of course, Tim Harrington ain't going to the police because he's an in the closet man. And there ain't no way Tim Harrington is going to go and talk about this because he just couldn't talk about it. So, yeah, yes, it does, Jamie. Yes, it means that they're on the down low. Essentially, I believe it's a term used. Again, I'm not 100% certain. I don't know, but I believe it's a term used for closeted, but I'm not certain. I'm not. If someone comes on here and says you're wrong on that, but I believe it is. It was a term that Javon used earlier, and that was what I believe he was referencing, where he said there's plenty of other down low men. But I believe down low is what Javon was saying, because I believe Tim Harrington was not out. I don't think people knew, besides, which is what the issue was here between him and Jay Lee. So again, it's a dangerous world, and that's what I think the defense is trying to put out there to say, listen, we don't know, because Jay Lee could have gone on to the next guy, and that next guy could have done something to him. But the problem is Jay Lee doesn't have, they have Jay Lee's social media, and Jay Lee was clearly a guy that was on social media, and Jay Lee's talking to his friend all the way right up till he gets to Tim Harrington's house, and then he never talks to anyone else. He doesn't call his mom, so we know whatever happened to Jay Lee happened that morning around 6 o'clock to 7, 6 to 7 to 8 o'clock. He never called his mom. He never made it to late in the morning because he never reached out to anybody else. So whatever happened then. Now, like I said, you get back there, and what this senator is trying to do is go into what you would call, it's like what they were doing in the Chloe Driver case when they put on the expert who they were questioning her about her choice of music and her studies and her more liberal attitude sorts things. And they understood in Cherokee County, Georgia, what played and didn't play. And this senator understands what plays and doesn't play down there in the Mississippi. I'm not sure what county it is, but in the area of Mississippi that they're in. And just like Javon was sharing with us, it's very likely that he'll probably walk, because that's just where they're at. Deanie Cole, yes, that did happen. That happened earlier this year. That happened in August. His parents went to court and had him legally declared dead. It is used in general, not just in the closet, undercover, how I hear it. And let's keep this on the down low. Okay. Yeah, well, see, that's what I said. I'm not sure. I don't want to use terms, but again, I don't know. So I was piggybacking that off of what Javon shared with us earlier, and it was my assumption that he meant in the closet. Maybe it's not completely in the closet. I have no idea. But listen, the sad part is that any of that has to exist for those people, because they're hiding themselves. This is the stuff that can happen. Look, just be yourself. If people love you, families love you, they'll respect you, hopefully. I know it's not always like that. I know there's terrible situations out there like this where somebody takes extreme measures to protect their lifestyle because they just feel like it's something that can't be out here. And that's a shame, because Tim Harrington's suffering still even today. And I guess everybody kind of knows what's going on now, but it's just a shame that he felt that way about himself. And I'm sure it's not something that he's probably even comfortable about right now. But, you know, it's really a shame. And especially it's a shame because it resulted in another human being's life being taken, senselessly being taken potentially. And if it wasn't Tim, it's probably likely it was somebody else who might have been in a position to Tim, but or maybe it was some sort of something that went too far with them sexually. But I mean, you know, yeah. So I just was actually checking out the Law and Crime chat. The final thing in here says that so looks like there's some sort of connection to a funeral home or something. I don't know. People are talking about that and they're very interesting stuff. But like I said, this is an interesting case. Like I said, it's to me, there is some strength to the evidence, but and in my opinion, looking at the evidence thus far, I'm swayed towards guilty, but I'm also understanding that there's other explanations. So I'm not completely at guilty, but I'm thinking to myself, when I'm looking at the evidence, there isn't any other explanation that makes sense. So therefore, because it's circumstantial evidence, I'm allowed to infer from the circumstantial evidence and what it says that this guy, the most likely outcome, and again, that reasonable doubt is not, you don't have unreasonable doubt. Reasonable doubt is doubt in a reasonable person's mind. And is it reasonable to think that this young man goes to the house? He's Googled strangulation. He Googles find body in a lake. The body's never been found. Now, we don't know if he actually was in a lake. Maybe he was searching that. Why the heck he was searching that, I have no idea. It's very odd. Now, that could also be evidence that he's aware something happened. But it tells me that Tim had to know something was happening. But listen, absolutely, Melissa. And that's what we have to do. That's the danger. What we're doing right now, remember this, right? What we're doing right now is what the jury is not allowed to do. They're sitting around, they're sequestered, they're hopefully not deliberating, and they're hopefully watching movies and participating in whatever the state of Mississippi is going to use to keep them entertained. But the most important thing is they're not thinking about the case, they're not concluding about the case, and they're just being in the moment. They're having every moment of this trial is a present sense impression of that moment right now without thinking or putting themselves on one side of the fence or the other. And the first time they're going to sit down and think, where do I stand on this, is hopefully after closing arguments, after they've heard everything. If they do it that way, then they're going to fairly come out with a fair verdict. Because what we're doing right now is we are, again, even myself, I'm putting myself over in a place. And then I'm looking for the trial to move me out of that position. And that's not really a fair way to assess the trial. He tried to use gay panic as his defense. Well, I mean, in this case, he doesn't have to use that because if he did this, he did a heck of a job getting rid of the body. That's the crazy part. Like, somebody else had to help him. I mean, how does a college student like him, or I guess he may have recently graduated, he owned a movie, but how does he get rid of that daggone body? I mean, to the point that nobody could find it. 71 searches. There's not 1 ounce of DNA anywhere. But I think that we got to watch the rest of the case. But listen, I will not be surprised, and I will go on the record to say this right now. I will not be surprised if it's not guilty verdict, because I can also understand that at the end of the case, right now, as I'm looking at the case, I'm at like the top step, right? If the case stopped right now, but I'm not over, right? Because there are other explanations. There's other things that could have happened. The only question is, are those doubts about the case reasonable? Is it reasonable to think right now that when we see a video of Tim Herrington running out of the apartment, getting in the car with his friend and being dropped off, do we need to know what happened after that? Does it matter that a body wasn't found? Do we need to go further than that? And the answer to that is the state has to prove he was kidnapped. So the question is, what's their theory on the kidnapping? Because in order for him to get the capital case, they got to say that. Unless, again, I don't have Mississippi law in front of me. In West Virginia, it would be simply restricting movement or moving. It could have been that if he puts him in a chokehold, moves him over, and then doesn't let him leave the apartment, that's kidnapping. So if it's that simple in Mississippi, there's the kidnapping. It's not that hard to prove. But the defense made a big deal of it in their opening and said, listen, even if you think he killed the guy, they got to prove kidnapping. They went with a charge that requires you to prove 2 charges in order to get to guilty. So that's an interesting argument to make to the jury. But, I'm glad Javon Franklin came in to hand me a paradigm shift today. I am too. Javon, I hope you did not feel like, we were biased against him. We're not at all. We're very open over here. So I'm just telling you how I'm feeling and what I'm looking at, what I'm thinking, right? But I appreciate what you shared because you got me thinking that there's something else I got to look about. And since I'm not a juror on the case, I can go look. And I'm going to go to Reddit. I'm going to try to dig some stuff out on this case. And I'll come and continue to share with you guys as I find it. And you guys do the same thing because tomorrow we'll be back at it. So maybe we'll talk about this later tonight. I think I'm going to try to maybe do a show later tonight on the Ferris sentencing because I still got a lot of thoughts on that. I want to talk about it. So we might do that, but we're going to continue talking about this because this is our case for it looks like for the next couple of weeks. So like I said, this is the fun cases I like to cover because it truly has a lot of stuff to it. It's really going to be an interesting deliberation. It's going to be interesting to see if they come back quick or they take a little while, if they come back guilty or they come back not. It's really this is not an like I said, it sounds simple, but it's not because there's so much more that goes in to this type of a case, especially when it's located in Mississippi, especially when the attorney is a well-respected state senator, especially when you have the facts and circumstances surrounding the victim in this case and the defendant in this case. Wild stuff, but it's great stuff. But it's the stuff, this is the fun cases. So I hope you guys all join me tomorrow. Melissa, Jamie, Javon, come back and see us. Watch the trial with us. Deanie, as always, appreciate you guys. My Crime Time. Appreciate all of you, especially Javon Franklin, taking the time to come in and talk to us. We were very happy to have you. And always happy to have you come back and share with us and keep us on the straight and narrow and give us any inside info you can. Because, look, we want to see justice done here. And justice is they got to come in and the state needs to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. And they need to meet that standard. And that's what we're looking for. So if they fail to meet that standard, even if we think he could have done it, then it's a not guilty verdict. And I'm okay with supporting that. So we will do that. But like I said, right now, I'm really interested to hear. But right now, I think there's some strong evidence that's coming out here, depending on what the state does with it. But if the state were to leave it just here, we'll see what the defense does. I'm very curious. I'm very curious to see if the defense puts on a defense. Are they going to put him on the witness stand? Because I see some opportunity here on how they could spin this. And I don't know. We'd see how he holds up. Because I think, I don't know. Be very interesting. But I think it'd be very dangerous to put him on the stand. Because he'd have to come up with a story of exactly what happened when Jay Lee got to his house. But if he is innocent, then he can tell us exactly what happened. He can tie Tucker it, and he'll be fine. So we'll see what happens. But most of the time, I don't recommend, especially in cases like this where it's a reasonable doubt argument. I don't recommend he testify. So, but we'll see. So with that said, guys, I'm going to jump off here. I appreciate everybody watching today. I just want to come on and talk. Happen to be in a position to do so. I wanted to go over my thoughts on the case. I wanted to hear from you guys, and boy, did I ever. I'm so glad Javon came in and talked to us. And we'll go from there. So until we talk again, guys, which hopefully will be tomorrow at the latest, let justice prevail and keep watching. And I'll see you guys in court tomorrow.